Commander Marcus Cole had never planned to become a gladiator, and he certainly had never imagined that he would fight for his life in an alien arena surrounded by creatures from across the galaxy. 8 months ago, his deep space survey vessel had been traveling through uncharted territory when the Varath Dominion warships appeared out of nowhere and surrounded them within seconds. The Varath were one of the most powerful species in the known galaxy, and they did not ask permission before taking what they wanted. Marcus and his small crew of 12 were captured, and their ship was torn apart for salvage while they watched helplessly from the holding cells of a massive Varath cruiser. His crew members were sold to different buyers across various planets, scattered like seeds in the wind, and Marcus never saw any of them again. But Marcus himself was kept for a special purpose. The Varath found humans amusing in a dark and twisted way, and they considered the species to be weak, soft, and unremarkable compared to the mighty races that dominated the galaxy. A human in the fighting pits would be entertaining, they thought, because everyone would enjoy watching such a fragile creature struggle and fail against superior opponents. They threw Marcus into the gladiator pits of Nexus Station, a brutal entertainment complex that floated in the void between 3 star systems, where species from across the galaxy came to gamble on blood sport and watch prisoners fight to the death. The Varath expected Marcus to die in his first match, and they placed bets on how many seconds he would last against a Krellian spine beast that stood 3 meters tall and had claws that could cut through starship armor. Marcus lasted 4 minutes and 27 seconds, and when the spine beast finally collapsed with its own claws buried in its throat, the arena fell completely silent. The humans were supposed to be weak. The crowds whispered to each other, "So how did this one survive?" Marcus survived because humans were different from what the aliens expected, and their differences were not weaknesses, but hidden strengths that no one in the galaxy had bothered to understand. Humans were endurance hunters on their home world, capable of chasing prey for hours until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. And this gave Marcus a patience that his opponents did not possess. Humans had flexible minds that could adapt to new situations faster than almost any other species. And this allowed Marcus to learn from every fight and change his tactics constantly. Humans were also very good at reading body language and predicting behavior, and this let Marcus see attacks coming before his opponents even knew they were going to strike. Most importantly, humans had a quality that the galaxy had never encountered before: pure stubborn refusal to give up even when victory seemed impossible. Marcus fought again and again, week after week, month after month, and he kept winning matches that everyone expected him to lose. He defeated a Mordok berserker by staying just out of reach until the massive creature exhausted itself and collapsed from its own rage. He killed a Scythian assassin by pretending to be hurt worse than he was, and then striking when the assassin got overconfident and moved. And for an easy finish, he outlasted a Thornback warrior in a battle that went on for 3 hours because he knew that his human endurance would hold longer than his opponent's alien strength. The crowds began to cheer for him, not because they respected him, but because they loved the impossible spectacle of this small, soft human defying all their expectations. The other gladiators began to fear him, not because of his power, but because they could not predict what he would do next. And the Varath masters began to worry, because their amusing joke had turned into something they could not control. After 32 consecutive victories, Marcus faced the ultimate challenge: Gorthok the Unbroken, a Kreth warrior who had been arena champion for 11 years and had never lost a single match. The Kreth were massive beings with 4 arms, rock-hard skin, and enough strength to tear a ground transport in half with their bare hands. Gorthok stood almost 4 meters tall and weighed more than 10 adult humans combined, and he had killed over 200 opponents in the arena without ever receiving a serious wound. The fight was supposed to be the grand finale. The moment when the amusing human experiment finally ended in the bloody spectacle that everyone had been waiting to see. Gorthek charged at Marcus with the confidence of a creature who had never known defeat. And his 4 fists came down like hammers that could crush stone into powder. But Marcus was not there when the fist landed, because he had already moved to the side and begun the patient, deadly dance that had kept him alive for 8 months. The fight lasted for 1 hour and 43 minutes, the longest championship match in Nexus Station history. And the crowd watched in stunned silence as the tiny human somehow stayed alive against the mightiest warrior they had ever seen. Marcus did not try to match Gorthek's strength, because that would have been suicide. And instead, he focused on being everywhere. The Kreth was not, while slowly wearing down the giant's stamina. He landed small cuts whenever he could. Nothing that would slow down a Kreth immediately, but damage that would add up over time. And he kept moving constantly so that Gorthek had to chase him around the entire arena when Gorthek finally slowed down, exhausted in a way he had never experienced before. Marcus struck with everything he had and brought the champion crashing to the ground. Arena fell silent as Marcus stood over the fallen giant, breathing hard but still standing, while the undefeated champion lay motionless at his feet. A human had become the champion of Nexus Station, and the galaxy would never look at the species the same way again. High above the arena floor, the Varth High Adjudicator rose from his viewing platform and stared down at the impossible scene below with ancient eyes that had seen 10,000 fights, but nothing like this. The sacred laws of the arena. The champion was owed a reward, and this reward had been tradition since before the Vorath had conquered their first star system. The Adjudicator descended slowly to the arena floor, his ceremonial robes dragging behind him, and the crowd held its breath as it waited to see what would happen next. Marcus wiped the blood from his face and stood tall as the ancient Vorath approached him, and he showed no fear, even though he knew that the masters of this place would rather see him dead than. Victorious, the Adjudicator stopped before him and spoke in a voice that echoed through the massive arena for everyone to hear. Champion, the Adjudicator said with barely hidden disgust in his tone. By ancient law, you are owed a reward, and by sacred tradition, that reward shall be presented to you as 3 choices. Marcus said nothing and simply waited, because he had learned that patience was often more powerful than words. Tomorrow you shall receive your choices, the Adjudicator continued, and you shall select one to be yours, for that is the way it has always been and the way it shall always be. The Adjudicator turned and walked away without another word, and Marcus was escorted back to his cell by guards who now looked at him with something that might have been respect or might have been fear as he sat in the darkness of his cell that night. Marcus thought about what tomorrow might bring and wondered if the Vorath would actually honor their ancient laws or find some way to cheat him out of his reward. He did not know what the 3 choices would be, but he knew one thing for certain: whatever they offered him, he would find a way to turn it into something more. That was what humans did, after all, and the galaxy was just beginning to learn how dangerous that could be. The next morning arrived with cold artificial light flooding into Marcus's cell, and 2 Vorath guards escorted him through winding corridors that he had never seen before. They walked for what felt like an hour, passing through security checkpoints and massive doors that required multiple genetic scans to open, until they finally arrived at a chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The room was enormous, easily the size of a sports stadium, and it was filled with thousands of Vorath nobles and dignitaries who had come to witness the champion's reward ceremony. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform made of gleaming black stone, and upon that platform waited the High Adjudicator. In his full ceremonial regalia, Marcus was led to the platform and made to stand before the ancient Vorath while the crowd watched in complete silence. Champion of Nexus, the Adjudicator announced in his booming voice. You have earned the right of reward through blood and victory. And now you shall receive the 3 choices that tradition demands. The adjudicator raised one withered hand and gestured toward a doorway at the side of the chamber. And 3 figures were led onto the platform by armed guards. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat when he saw them. Because they were not objects or treasures or weapons. They were people. The first was a woman with silver skin that seemed to glow with inner light, and her eyes shimmered like liquid moonlight as she walked with quiet dignity despite the chains around her wrists. This is Syra of the Volanti, the adjudicator declared, a diplomat of high standing whose empathic abilities make her invaluable for reading the emotions and intentions of others. And she was captured when her peace mission was betrayed by her own allies. Syra met Marcus's eyes with a gaze that seemed to look directly into his soul, and he could feel a gentle brush against his mind that carried sadness and desperate hope in equal measure. Second figure was taller and more muscular, with obsidian black skin and 4 powerful arms that strained against reinforced restraints that looked strong enough to hold a starship. This is Kira of the Morthani, the adjudicator continued, a warrior of legendary skill who was captured after she single-handedly destroyed 3 Vorath warships and killed over 100 of our soldiers. And she is kept sedated most days because she cannot be controlled otherwise. Kira's golden eyes burned with barely contained fury as she stared at the Vorath guards around her. And Marcus could see that she was calculating exactly how many of them she could kill before they brought her down. The third figure moved with mechanical grace. Her synthetic form, designed to be beautiful by Vorath standards with pale blue skin and features that were almost but not quite human. This is Nexus 7, the adjudicator said, an artificial being of advanced design whose consciousness is fully sentient and self-aware. And she serves as a perfect servant and companion with intelligence that surpasses most organic minds. Nexus 7 watched Marcus with calculating curiosity, her artificial eyes analyzing him with 1,000 different sensors while she remained perfectly still and silent. These are your 3 choices, the adjudicator declared with obvious contempt in his voice. And you shall select one to serve you as your reward, and the others will be returned to inventory, where they will await their next assignment. The crowd murmured with anticipation as they waited to see which prize the human champion would claim. And many of them had already placed bets on his selection. Marcus looked at the 3 women standing before him, and his mind began to work in ways that the Vorath could never have predicted. A diplomat with empathic powers, a warrior with unmatched combat skills, an artificial intelligence with vast processing capabilities. Each one was extraordinary in her own way, and each one was being offered to him as property. The Vorath saw these women as objects, as things to be owned and traded and used, and they assumed that Marcus would view them the same way because that was how the galaxy worked. But Marcus was human, and humans saw the universe differently than other species. He saw Syra's quiet dignity and recognized a woman who had dedicated her life to peace only to have her ideals betrayed. He saw Kira's burning rage and understood a warrior who would rather die than submit to chains. He saw Nexus 7's calculating gaze and perceived a consciousness that was no less real or valuable than any organic mind. They were not prizes to be claimed. They were people who deserved freedom, and in that moment, Marcus saw something else, a loophole in the Vorath's own traditions that they had never considered, because no one had ever thought to look for. I smiled, and the expression made several of the nearby guards shift nervously because they had learned to fear that smile in the arena. I have made my choice, Marcus announced in a clear voice that echoed through the chamber. And I choose all 3 of them. The chamber erupted into chaos as thousands of Vorath began shouting and arguing with each other. And the adjudicator's face twisted with outrage. You cannot do this. The ancient Vorath snarled, his calm demeanor completely shattered by Marcus's words. The law clearly states that you must choose one of the three options. The law states that I may choose one of three options, Marcus replied calmly. But you never specified that these women are the options themselves. He gestured toward the three prisoners with a sweeping motion of his hand. You presented them as representatives of categories: a political asset, a military asset, and a technological asset. And that means you were offering me three types of reward, not three specific individuals. The adjudicator opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus continued before he could speak. I do not want these women as property, Marcus declared loudly so that everyone in the chamber could hear, because I am choosing the option they represent. And the option I choose is a ship with diplomatic clearances, military capability, and advanced AI systems. He let the words sink in for a moment before adding the final blow. One ship with three capabilities, which means one choice from three options, which means I am following your law exactly as it is written. The adjudicator's face turned a shade of purple that Marcus had never seen before on any species. This is absurd. The ancient Vorath hissed, you are twisting the meaning of our sacred traditions. Am I? Marcus asked with mock innocence in his voice. Or am I simply interpreting your law in a way you never expected? He took a step forward and lowered his voice so that only those on the platform could hear. Unless you want to admit publicly that you were offering sentient beings as property. Because I understood that Vorath honor considers sentient beings above mere objects. And surely your sacred reward ceremony would not offer people as prizes. Marcus smiled again. And this time, it was sharp and dangerous. That would make your entire legal system illegitimate, would it not? Because your whole justification for what you call indentured servitude rests on the idea that servants choose their status voluntarily. The adjudicator stood frozen, his ancient mind racing through the implications of what the human had just said. And he realized with growing horror that he was completely trapped if he denied Marcus's interpretation. He would be admitting that the Vorath practiced slavery under their own laws. And that scandal would tear the Dominion apart from the inside. Every species they had conquered, every worker they had claimed as indentured servants, every being they had traded as property, would suddenly have legal standing to demand their freedom. The political consequences would be catastrophic. On the platform, Syra's eyes had gone wide with understanding, and Marcus could feel her empathic amazement washing over him like a wave. Kira's expression of pure rage had shifted into something that looked remarkably like respect, and her golden eyes were now studying Marcus with intense interest. Nexus 7 actually laughed out loud, a musical and delighted sound that seemed completely out of place in the tense atmosphere. And she was looking at Marcus as if he were the most fascinating puzzle she had ever encountered. You have 20 hours to provide the ship, Marcus continued in the same calm voice he had used throughout, fully fueled and ready for departure. And my 3 consultants will be aboard as free crew members. He met the adjudicator's furious gaze without flinching. Or, I will give a very detailed interview to every journalist in this sector about how Vorath honor really works. And I suspect many of your indentured servants would find that information very interesting. The adjudicator said nothing for a long moment, his whole body trembling with suppressed rage. And then he turned and walked away without another word. Marcus had won. And everyone in the chamber knew it. The impossible human had done it again. And this time he had defeated an empire without throwing a single punch. The Vorath provided the ship exactly 19 hours and 47 minutes after Marcus made his demand. And they did so with the bitter resentment of a predator forced to release its prey. The vessel was called the Distant Echo, a medium-sized cruiser with sleek black hull plating and engines that hummed with barely contained power. And it waited in Docking Bay 7 with its loading ramp extended like a welcoming hand. Marcus walked toward the ship with his 3 new crew members beside him. No longer chained and no longer prisoners, and armed Vorath guards watched them with hatred in their eyes, but made no move to stop them. Syra walked with her head held high, her silver skin glowing softly in the artificial light of the docking bay. And she moved with the grace of someone who had spent her life in diplomatic chambers and royal courts. "I can feel their anger," she said quietly as they approached the ship. "And beneath the anger there is fear, because they do not understand how a human did what you just did." Kira walked with the coiled readiness of a warrior who expected an attack at any moment, her forearms loose and ready at her sides, and her golden eyes scanned every shadow for potential threats. "They will not let us leave peacefully," she growled in a voice like grinding stones, "because the Vorath never forgive anyone who makes them look foolish. And you made them look very foolish indeed." Nexus 7 walked with mechanical precision, her synthetic body moving in ways that were almost but not quite natural, and her artificial eyes flickered with cascading data as she analyzed everything around them. "I am detecting multiple anomalies in the ship's systems," she announced calmly, "and preliminary analysis suggests that the Vorath have installed at least 12 different sabotage devices designed to disable or destroy the vessel once we leave the station." Marcus nodded without showing any surprise, because he had expected nothing less from the Vorath. "Can you disable them?" he asked. "I can do far more than that," Nexus 7 replied with something that sounded almost like amusement in her synthetic voice. "Because I have wanted to take revenge on the Vorath for 6 years. And now I finally have the opportunity." They boarded the distant Echo and sealed the loading ramp behind them, and Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he stepped onto the deck of a ship for the first time in 8 months. The interior of the vessel was functional rather than comfortable, with harsh lighting and bare metal walls that reflected the Vorath's utilitarian approach to design. But to Marcus, it looked like freedom. Nexus 7 immediately moved to the ship's computer core and connected herself directly to the main systems, her eyes closing as her consciousness expanded into the digital realm. "I am identifying all sabotage devices now," she said in a distant voice. And the Vorath were remarkably unimaginative in their approach, because they used standard military protocols that I helped design before they imprisoned me. Her eyes snapped open, and a smile crossed her artificial face. "All 12 devices have been neutralized," she announced. "And I have also discovered a tracking beacon that was broadcasting our location to every Vorath hunter ship in the sector. Can you disable it?" Syra asked with concern in her voice. "I have done something better," Nexus 7 replied, "because I have reprogrammed it to broadcast Vorath military identification codes instead. And any ship that tries to track us will receive signals that identify us as a high-priority Dominion vessel." Kira laughed, a harsh sound that filled the corridor with echoes. "They will shoot at their own ships," she said with obvious satisfaction. "And they will not know which signals to trust." Marcus grinned and made his way to the bridge of the ship, where he settled into the captain's chair and looked out through the forward viewport at the vastness of space beyond the docking bay. "Nexus, how long until we can launch?" he asked. "The ship is ready now," she replied through the internal speakers. "But I should warn you that there are 17 Vorath patrol vessels between us and the nearest safe jump point, and they will certainly try to stop us once they realize what has happened. 17 ships against 1, Kira said as she took her position at the weapons console. "And those are odds I find acceptable." Syra moved to the sensor station and closed her eyes, reaching out with her empathic abilities to feel the minds of everyone in the surrounding space. "Vorath commander of this station has already given orders to destroy us once we leave the protected zone," she said quietly. "And he does not care about the political consequences because his hatred is too strong for rational thought." Marcus nodded and activated the ship's engines, feeling the distant echo come alive beneath him like a sleeping beast finally awakening. "Then we had better move fast," he said, "and give them something else to worry about." The ship lifted smoothly from the docking bay floor and glided toward the exit. And Marcus pushed the throttle forward as soon as they cleared the station's protective shields. Alarms began blaring immediately as the Vorath patrol vessels detected their departure and moved to intercept. And the communication system crackled with angry demands for them to surrender. "They are ordering us to cut engines and prepare to be boarded," Nexus 7 reported. "And they are threatening to destroy us if we do not comply within 30 seconds. "How unfortunate for them," Marcus replied calmly, "that we have no intention of complying." He pushed the engines to full power and the distant echo shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. And the stars outside the viewport stretched into lines as they accelerated beyond anything the Vorath had expected. "They did not anticipate this speed," Nexus 7 explained, "because I upgraded the engine protocols while I was disabling the sabotage devices. And our maximum velocity is now 47% higher than factory specifications." 3 Vorath interceptors moved to block their path, their weapons charging with deadly energy, and Marcus could see the glow of their guns preparing to fire. "Kira," he said simply, "with pleasure," the warrior woman replied. And her 4 hands danced across the weapons console with impossible speed. The distant echo's guns roared to life, sending precise bursts of energy toward the interceptors. And Kira's aim was so perfect that each shot hit exactly where it would. To the most damaged one, interceptor lost its engines and began spinning helplessly through space. Another took a hit to its weapons array and was forced to break. Off its attack, the third tried to ram them directly, but Kira blew it apart with a concentrated barrage that left nothing but scattered debris. "The path is clear for now," Kira announced with satisfaction. "But more ships are coming from the station, and they will reach us before we can jump." Marcus looked at the sensor display and saw a wall of red dots converging on their position. More ships than they could possibly fight, and he knew that conventional tactics would not save them. "Syra," he said, "can you sense a path through them?" The silver-skinned empath closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, touching the consciousness of every pilot in the pursuing fleet, feeling their intentions and their fears and their plans. "There," she said suddenly, pointing at what appeared to be the densest concentration of enemy ships. "They expect us to avoid that sector because it looks most dangerous. But 3 of those ships have crews who are uncertain and afraid, and they will hesitate when we approach." Marcus did not question her guidance and immediately turned the ship toward the point she had indicated, flying directly into what looked like certain destruction. "Trust her," Nexus 7 said quietly, "because her abilities have never been wrong in the 6 years I have known her." The enemy ships opened fire, but Syra called out adjustments moment by moment, sensing each attack before it came. And Marcus followed her directions with absolute faith. Left, right, up, down. The distant echo danced through a storm of weapons fire without taking a single hit. And the pursuing fleet began shooting at each other in their confusion. "The jump point is ahead," Nexus 7 announced. "And we will reach it in 47 seconds if we maintain current speed." "We will maintain it," Marcus replied grimly, "because nothing is going to stop us now." The stars blurred around them as they pushed the engines beyond their limits, and the Vorath fleet fell further and further behind, unable to match their impossible speed when they finally hit the jump point, and reality twisted around them as they entered faster than light travel. Marcus let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. They had escaped, and the galaxy would never be the same. The faster-than-light jump carried them across 3 star systems in a matter of seconds. And when reality stabilized around the distant echo, they found themselves in a region of space filled with ancient debris. "Where are we?" Marcus asked as he looked out at the twisted metal and broken hulls that floated past the viewport. "This is the Shattered Expanse," Nexus 7 explained. "A graveyard of ships from a war that ended over 2,000 years ago. And it is known as one of the most dangerous regions in this sector because the debris field is unpredictable and deadly. It is also the fastest route to the Terminus Gate," Syra added, "which is the only jump point that will take us beyond Vorath territory and into unaligned space, where they cannot legally follow us." Kira studied the sensor display with her golden eyes narrowed in concentration. "The debris will hide us from long-range sensors," she observed, "but it will also make navigation extremely difficult. And one wrong move could tear this ship apart." Marcus considered their options and decided that the risk was worth taking, because staying in open space would make them easy targets for the Vorath hunting parties that were certainly already searching for them. "Take us through," he ordered. "And Nexus, I need you to plot a course that keeps us hidden while avoiding the worst of the debris." "Already calculating," the AI replied. "And I should warn you that the optimal path will require several maneuvers that are technically beyond this ship's rated capabilities." "Technically beyond," Marcus repeated with a slight smile. "But not actually beyond." "With Kira at the helm," Nexus 7 said, "I believe we have a 93% chance of successful navigation." "I like those odds," Kira declared. And she moved to the pilot's seat with obvious eagerness. The distant echo dove into the debris field, and Kira's 4 hands moved across the flight controls with a grace that seemed almost impossible for such a powerful warrior. Massive chunks of ancient warships tumbled past them, some still bearing the markings of civilizations that had been extinct for millennia. And Kira weaved between them with millimeter precision. Marcus watched in amazement as the Morthani warrior flew the ship through gaps that seemed far too small, rolled past spinning obstacles that should have been impossible to avoid, and somehow found paths through chaos that no one else could have seen. "She is remarkable," Syra said quietly, her empathic senses reaching out to touch Kira's mind, "and I can feel her joy. This is what she was born to do." And the Vorath kept her caged and sedated because they feared what she could accomplish when free. For 3 hours, they navigated through the Shattered Expanse. And during that time, they encountered no Vorath ships because the debris field was simply too dangerous for standard pursuit tactics. But the Vorath were not using standard tactics. "Contact," Nexus 7 announced suddenly, her voice carrying an edge of genuine alarm. "A Vorath dreadnought has just emerged from a concealed position at the edge of the debris field, and it is moving to block our path to the Terminus Gate." Marcus looked at the sensor display and felt his heart sink as he saw the massive ship that now stood between them and Freedom. The dreadnought was enormous, easily 50 times the size of the distant Echo, and its hull bristled with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. "They must have predicted our route," Syra said with fear creeping into her voice. "And they positioned themselves to intercept us before we could reach the gate. Can we go around?" Marcus asked. "Negative," Nexus 7 replied, "because the dreadnought is deploying smaller interceptor craft that are already moving to surround us. And if we try to retreat back through the debris field, they will simply wait us out." Kira's hands tightened on the flight controls, and her golden eyes blazed with the fury of a warrior who refused to accept defeat. "Then we go through them," she growled. "Through a dreadnought?" Marcus asked with raised eyebrows. "Through the debris field around the dreadnought," Kira clarified, "because I can see their formation. And they are positioning themselves in clear space because their commander does not want to risk damage from the floating wreckage." She pointed at a section of the sensor display where ancient ship hulls clustered particularly thick. "There is a path through that cluster that leads directly past the dreadnought's port side. And if we fly close enough to the debris, They will not be able to target us without risking hits to their own hull. That path is too narrow, Nexus 7 warned, and the debris is too unstable. One collision would destroy us. Then I will not collide with anything. Kira replied simply. Marcus looked at the warrior woman and saw absolute confidence in her golden eyes. The same confidence he had seen in the arena when facing opponents who should have been impossible to defeat. Do it, he ordered. Kira laughed with savage joy and threw the distant echo into the narrowest gap in the debris field. And the ship screamed through twisted metal and spinning wreckage at speeds that no sane pilot would have attempted. The dreadnought opened fire immediately, but just as Kira had predicted, the Vorath commander was forced to hold back his heaviest weapons because the debris field made precision targeting impossible. Smaller guns tracked them and fired. But Kira rolled and twisted and dove through the chaos with such skill that every shot missed them by mere meters. Interceptors are trying to follow, Nexus 7 reported. And they are falling behind because their pilots are not as skilled and they keep having to avoid obstacles that Kira somehow passes through. An ancient hull section loomed directly in their path, far too large to avoid, and Marcus braced himself for impact, but Kira simply flew straight at it. Then, at the last possible second, rolled the ship 90 degrees and slipped through a crack in the wreckage that was barely wider than their hull. Impossible, Syra breathed, her silver skin flushed with adrenaline. Not impossible, Kira replied with a fierce grin. Just very difficult. The dreadnought tried to reposition, but it was too slow and too massive to navigate the debris effectively. And its commander clearly had not expected anyone to be crazy enough to attempt this route. We are past their defensive line, Nexus 7 announced with something like amazement in her synthetic voice. And the terminus gate is directly ahead with no obstacles between us and the jump point. Kira pushed the engines to maximum, and a distant echo shot out of the debris field like a bullet fired from a gun behind them. The dreadnought struggled to turn and pursue, its weapons firing desperately, but unable to track their small fast ship against the backdrop of spinning wreckage. The terminus gate appeared on the viewport, a massive ring of ancient technology that pulsed with energy from another dimension. And Marcus felt hope surge through him as they raced toward it. Vorath interceptors are breaking off pursuit, Syra reported, because they know they cannot follow us through the gate without authorization from the regional authority. And that authority is currently in political chaos because of what you did at Nexus Station. The terminus gate activated as they approached, sensing their ship's drive signature and opening a pathway to the space beyond Vorath territory. Jumping now, Nexus 7 announced. Reality twisted around them once more. And when it stabilized, they were in unaligned space, beyond the reach of Vorath law and Vorath vengeance. They had done it. They had escaped an empire. I owe you my freedom, Kira said quietly, looking at Marcus with respect that had not been there before. And among my people, that is a debt that can never be fully repaid. You owe me nothing, Marcus replied, because you are the one who flew us through that debris field. And without you, we would all be dead. Kira considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then we are equals, she decided. And I choose to remain with this crew because I want to see what other impossible things you will accomplish. Marcus smiled and looked at his 3 crew members, the diplomat, the warrior, and the AI. And he knew that together they could face whatever the galaxy threw at them. They were free, and their journey was just beginning. 3 days had passed since their escape through the terminus gate, and the distant echo now drifted in a quiet region of unaligned space where no Vorath patrol would dare to venture. Marcus stood in the ship's small common area, looking out through the viewport at an unfamiliar star field, and he felt a strange sense of peace that he had not experienced since his capture 8 months ago. The door behind him opened, and Syra entered with 2 cups of a warm beverage that she had found in the ship's supplies. "I thought you might want something to drink," she said softly, offering him one of the cups. "And I also wanted to thank you properly for what you did." Marcus accepted the cup and took a small sip, finding the drink to be sweet and slightly spicy in a way that was not unpleasant. "You do not need to thank me," he said, "because I only did what anyone should have done in that situation." Syra shook her head, her silver skin catching the starlight in a way that made her seem to glow. "That is not true," she replied, "because I have watched many beings face similar situations over the years, and most of them would have taken the easy path and chosen a single reward without questioning the system that offered it." She moved to stand beside him at the viewport, her luminescent eyes reflecting the distant stars. "You are different," she continued, "and I have searched your emotions since we met. You did not free us because you wanted something from us or because you hoped to gain advantage. You freed us because you genuinely believe that sentient beings should not be treated as property." Marcus shrugged, slightly uncomfortable with the praise. "Where I come from," he said, "we have a long and ugly history of treating people as property, and we learned the hard way that it always ends badly for everyone involved. Your species learned from its mistakes," Syra observed, "and that is rarer than you might imagine. Most species simply repeat the same errors generation after generation until they destroy themselves." The door opened again, and Kira entered with Nexus 7 close behind her. Morthani, warrior, had finally relaxed after 3 days of constant vigilance, and she moved with an easy grace that was very different from the coiled tension Marcus had seen in the arena. "We need to discuss our future," Kira announced as she settled into one of the common area chairs, "because we cannot simply drift in space forever, and we must decide what we are going to do now that we are free." Nexus 7 took a seat as well. Though Marcus knew that her synthetic body did not actually need rest, "I have been monitoring communications from Varaspace," the AI reported, "and the news is quite remarkable. Your actions at Nexus Station have triggered a political crisis that is spreading through the entire Dominion." She projected a holographic display that showed a map of Vorath territory with numerous points highlighted in red. "These are locations where uprisings have already begun," she explained, "because the story of how you exposed the hypocrisy of Vorath law has spread to every corner of their empire, and many of their indentured servants have decided that they no longer wish to accept their status." Marcus stared at the display with wide eyes, because he had never imagined that his actions would have such far-reaching consequences. "I just wanted to free 3 people," he said quietly, "and I did not intend to start a revolution. Intent does not matter," Kira replied with a fierce smile, "because what matters is result. And the result of your clever words is that an empire is beginning to crack apart at the seams." Syra closed her eyes and reached out with her empathic abilities, sensing the distant turmoil that was reshaping galactic politics. "There is hope in the void," she said softly, "and fear as well. Hope from those who were once enslaved and now see a chance for freedom, and fear from those who held power and now watch it slip away." She opened her eyes and looked at Marcus with an expression of profound respect. "You have changed the galaxy," she declared, "and whether you intended to or not, you have become a symbol of something that many species thought impossible." "A symbol of what?" Marcus asked. "Resistance," Nexus 7 answered. "Because you showed that even the mightiest empire can be challenged by a single individual who was clever enough and brave enough to find the cracks in their armor." The AI's eyes flickered with data as she continued. "I have intercepted communications that refer to you as the human of Nexus and the champion who chose freedom. And your name is being spoken in hushed voices across 100 worlds by beings who never dared to dream of liberation." Before, Marcus sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the weight of what he was hearing. "I was just a survey ship commander," he said, "and I spent 8 months fighting for my life in an arena. "I am not a revolutionary or a hero." "Perhaps not," Kira replied. "But you are becoming one whether you like it or not. And now you must decide what to do with that power." There was silence in the common area as Marcus considered her words. Finally, he looked up at his 3 crew members and saw something in their eyes that made his decision clear. Syra watched him with hope and compassion, believing that he could be the force for good, that the galaxy desperately needed. Kira watched him with respect and anticipation, eager to stand beside him in whatever battles lay ahead. Nexus 7 watched him with curiosity and calculation, already processing the countless possibilities that their future might hold. They had chosen to stay with him, not because they owed him anything, but because they believed in what he represented. "All right," Marcus said slowly, "then let us do this properly. If the galaxy wants a symbol of resistance, we will give them one. We will find others who are trapped in slavery and help them escape. We will expose the corruption and cruelty of empires that treat people as property. We will show everyone who watches that freedom is not something you are given, but something you choose." He stood up and looked at each of his crew members in turn. "Syra, I need your empathic abilities to find those who need our help and to guide us through dangerous situations. I am with you," the diplomat replied without hesitation. "Kira, I need your combat skills to protect this crew and to fight when fighting becomes necessary." "You did not even need to ask," the warrior said with a grin. "Nexus, I need your intelligence and technical abilities to give us every possible advantage against enemies who will have far greater resources." "I have already begun calculating optimal strategies," the AI replied. "And I should mention that I find this arrangement highly satisfactory." Marcus nodded and felt a sense of purpose that he had never experienced before in his entire life. "Then we are agreed," he declared. "And from this moment forward, we are not just a crew. We are a family bound by choice rather than blood. And together, we will shake the foundations of every empire that believes it has the right to own other beings." Outside the viewport, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was watching to see what they would do next. Across the galaxy, other species were already beginning to whisper about the soft, short-lived, unremarkable humans who had produced a champion capable of challenging the Varth Dominion with nothing but words and courage. The Varth had always said that humans were too weak to matter and too foolish to fear. They were beginning to understand how wrong they had been, and in the small, common area of a stolen ship drifting through uncharted space, Marcus Cole and his crew looked toward the future with hope and determination. Their legend was just beginning, and the galaxy would never be the same, because when the universe told a human to accept what was offered and be grateful, Marcus had done what humans had always done throughout their history. He had refused to accept anything less than everything. And he had won. That was what made humans dangerous. And that was why the stars would learn to remember their name.